this. I don't know if you've seen the update on the short I posted before, but that was just an update letting you guys know that through me, what we call universe or reality or existence is manifested and being brought into oneness with. I'll update you with that soon. Such updates are coming as well. But doing some studying to show thyself approved, and I'm also running connections with electromagnetic universe or certain things of that aspect. But what we are supposed to be doing, I'm speaking collectively now as a collective oneness, the way that is us, is using the creation itself as signs and tools for us to now, when the oneness is to be focused on and coming from within us, because we are so caught up in, as a society, being free from being caught up in perceiving the world as effective, effective on us, instead of the effectiveness of us being the reason or the cause for existence to be in the first place. What I mean by that is it is our duty to open up, come on. Our duty to pray always, or be in constant edification of what is the kingdom, which is within us. What up? But during the oneness time, lock the door in the top, lock as well. During the oneness moments where you're supposed to put your whole focus on such things, is what you're searching for at the moment or the time when that is to lead up to. So, just giving you some clues. Stay tuned.
Days. For there shall be a great distress in the land, and wrath unto his people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all the nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by nations, until the times of nations be fulfilled. And there shall be signs in sun, and moon, and stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and waves roaring, men fainting for fear and for expectation of the things which are coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with great power. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, and lift up your heads, for your redemption draws near. And he spoke to them a parable. Behold the fig tree and all the trees, when they are already shoot forth, you see it, and know your own selves that summer is already near. So likewise you, when you see these things come to pass, know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I say unto you, the heaven and the earth shall in no wise pass away till all these things be accomplished. The heaven and the earth shall pass away, but my words shall in no wise pass away. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be weighed down with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on all of them that dwell on the face of all the earth. Watch therefore at every season, praying that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that are going to take place. And every day he was teaching in the temple, and at night he went out and lodged on the mountain that is called Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to him in the temple to hear him.
Says something to you. And then brothers and sisters in Christ, everyone trying to pick sides and teams, well, do you believe what I'm saying? And then, That is so evil, because what you're doing is you're trying to get them to turn on each other.
Come on.
You don't want to do that. Good advice. Someone bitter says something to you, say, I don't want to be a part of that. Yeah. All right, let's go back. But there's this ugly piety. A person who's suffering persecution for the name of Jesus, whatever that means. And what happens is it's confusing to everybody when they see this. So when they see two people who are bitter at each other and they love God, they love Jesus, they're soul winners, they love people, they do whatever for God, but there's this ugly evil that comes out. What happens? Confusion, verse 16. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Everybody, when they see, but there's this ugly evil that comes out. What happens? Confusion, verse 16. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work.
From trusting in our own ability. God does it to move us from self-reliance to God-reliance. Self-reliance to God. From trusting in our own ability to trusting in Him alone. Now, Jesus said in Matthew 6:34, so don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will bring its own worry. Today's trouble is enough for today. That does not mean it's wrong to plan ahead. I'm not saying that. You can plan ahead, that's biblical, but like one man said, you should plan ahead, but you shouldn't worry ahead. That's the big difference. Plan ahead, but don't worry ahead. Here's how Charles Haddon Spurgeon gave this truth. Elijah had enough, Spurgeon said, but it did not always come to him in the nicest way, for I do not imagine that the ravens knew how to get bread and meat always cut into the nicest shape. Perhaps they snatched a rough bit of meat here and perhaps the crust of bread there, and it came in all sorts of ugly pieces, but still there it was, and it was enough. Spurgeon continued, beggars are not to be choosers, we say, and certainly retirees on God's bounty ought not pick holes and find fault with the Lord's providing. Whatever God gives thee, be grateful for. For if too proud to take from the raven's mouth, it will be well for thee to go without until hunger consumes thy pride. God promises his people enough, but not more than enough. And even that enough may not come to us in the way we should choose. End quote. See, number 3, that's why God did not ask Elijah's permission before he sent the ravens. God didn't say, Elijah, is it okay if I feed you with ravens? Because what was Elijah said? Oh, no. Yuck. Those are dirty birds.
What can I help you find? I'm looking for these 6-toed footprints that were carved in the canyon wall behind Casa Bonita. Do you know where those are? The ranger says, yes, those footprints. They're located in an off-limits area. Unfortunately, we closed it off to the public. Closed to the public. Makes you wonder what else they have closed off to the public. And as we were about to leave the park, we decided to go and watch the 30-minute video inside the visitor center. And what we saw was shocking. They showed us petroglyphs from inside the park like no other we have ever seen. Perfectly clear images of interdimensional beings with pyramids stacked on top of their head. We walked through the entire park and did not see these petroglyphs. So it made me wonder, where are these petroglyphs and what else are they hiding from us?
get paid, and I got 10,000 for Bags and Bodies. This is a classic comedy. The Riot, Bullpen, I Battle. I've been on the move, you know? I even produced an studio and podcast for a year, and you've never even been in the studio. You are stupid, fool. I hope you paying attention. I came with a weapon, blessed from the Lord. The gun's Muslim. It'll bow and put forehead on the floor. I am in excellent form. I like that.
In 1999, an anthropologist working for the University of Utah published a book entitled Man-Corn: Cannibalism and Violence in the Prehistoric American Southwest. The term man-corn is the literal translation of the Aztec word tiactalui, which refers to a quote sacred meal of sacrificed human meat cooked with corn. In Turner's book, they provide evidence of cannibalism in 72 ancient Anasazi sites, including Chaco Canyon. Forensic evaluations of bones found at these sites proves they were cannibalized. But the question is by whom? Who were eating the Anasazi? After the collapse of Chaco Canyon, around 1150 AD, the remaining members of the Anasazi spread out and separated. They moved deep into remote canyons and started building their new dwellings high up on cliff faces or on highly fortified mesas. To archaeologists, it's as if the Anasazi were overtaken by some strange paranoia, hiding from some terrible enemy, but no matter how hard they looked, no enemy was found. Or was it?
And keeping in mind that these legends materialized globally at approximately the same time, it's more likely than not, in my opinion, that the universal story agrees with the record of every major culture of the ancient world in which the astonishingly consistent story is told of gods that descended from heaven and or came through spiral vortices to materialize in bodies of flesh. From Rome to Greece, and before that to Egypt, Persia, Assyria, Babylonia, Sumer, the earliest records of civilization tell of the era when powerful beings known to the Hebrews as Watchers, and in the book of Genesis as the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, mingled themselves with humans, giving birth to part celestial, part terrestrial hybrids known as Nephilim. The Bible says this happened when men began to increase on earth and daughters were born to them, when the sons of God saw the women's beauty, and they took wives from among them to sire their unusual offspring. I believe a record of this first incursion of hybrid humans and six-toed giants is recorded in Genesis 6:4, when it says there were giants in the earth in those days. That's the first incursion before the flood. And also after that, that is after the flood, the second incursion, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. The universal story agrees with the record of every major culture of the ancient world in which the astonishingly consistent story is told of gods that descended from heaven and or came through spiral vortices to materialize in bodies of flesh. From Rome to Greece, and before that to Egypt, Persia, Assyria, Babylonia, Sumer, the earliest records of civilization tell of the era when powerful beings known to the Hebrews as Watchers, and in the book of Genesis as the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, mingled themselves with humans, giving birth to part celestial, part terrestrial hybrids known as Nephilim. The Bible says this happened when men began to increase on earth and daughters were born to them, when the sons of God saw the women's beauty, and they took wives from among them to sire their unusual offspring. I believe a record of this is recorded in Genesis 6:4, when it says there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. This is Dr. Thomas Horn, and you are watching End Times Productions.
What's beneath us?
The ancient ones, the gods that used to rule the earth.
During research for our best-selling book, On the Path of the Immortals, I was given the unprecedented opportunity, really, to sit down with and to film Dr. Don Mose Jr., a third-generation medicine man who I met with for a large part of a day, and he told me the oldest legends of the Anasazi, which he had been told by his great-grandfather, who likewise had been told by his included stories of the Anasazi turning to sorcery, to sacrifice, cannibalism, after they had lost their way and were driven insane by a reptilian creature, which they depict with a halo above his head, of all things. Images of that being are, by the way, included in the petroglyphs that we filmed inside the canyons, and I believe that they likely attest to the fallen reptile or reptiles of biblical fame, which also misled humanity. As I said in the traditional Hogan at one of the Navajo schools Dr. Don Mose teaches at, he began drawing in the sand on the floor and reciting the first part of the story of the ancient Anasazi and how it had been repeated to him by his father and grandfather, who had also been told by their ancestors and so on, a legend that Dr. Mose alone had undoubtedly repeated hundreds of times before at the Navajo school. Now, since it was obvious to us that this Navajo historian was really indifferent to our camera and our recording plans, and in fact I could tell he was really uncomfortable with us putting him on film, but thankfully he let us proceed nevertheless. But I sat there and listened respectfully as he proceeded for nearly 2 hours to describe to this white man what's only ever been allowed a few times in history before, and that is the legendary stories of creation, of giants, of a great flood, of a reptilian deceiver, all from the voice of the nation's top medicine man. Dr. Mose even sang to us in the antiquated tongue of what I would call Old Testament history, paralleled in their earliest antiquity using the Navajo language. Now, not only did Dr. Mose substantiate the age-old and globally recorded story of those who come through portals and the impact that they have had on biblical and global history, past and present, not only did he weave Navajo Indian myths and legends seamlessly with our understanding of the 6 days of creation, the arrival of the Nephilim, and their connection to judgment by a global flood, followed by the repopulating of people around the world, and then a second incursion of the giants. But there were several instances in which, when I pushed Dr. Mose for greater detail, he would go off script, actually delineating from the official Navajo storyline to provide greater consistency between history and the way the Bible itself recorded certain events.
This is part of a ritual.
A ritual sacrifice?
As Mose was following the official storyline, the one that you would get from the Parks Department in the four corners of the U.S., about how the Anasazi didn't disappear, but rather they slowly migrated out of the area and became the modern Pueblo Indians, I expressed doubts to Dr. Mose about that story. And he responded by grinning just a little bit and saying, well, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but, and then he proceeded to tell us the older stories that his grandfather had repeated about these mysterious people actually disappearing after they came under mind control from a reptile with a halo, this carnivorous creature, suspiciously similar to what I later described in the Path of the Immortals book as fiery seraphim, which comes from the Hebrew seraph, the Hebrew Old Testament, fiery serpent. which also corresponds with a lot of other testaments around the ancient world, including the Sanskrit sarpa or sarpeen, which means reptile, and so on. Now, another case in point is when I told Dr. Mose what we had learned from the Apache about cannibalistic giants and then God destroying them in a flood. And he looks right into the camera and he says, "Oh yes." And then he reaches over and he picks up this illustrated book that he had authored that's used in the Navajo Nation schools and libraries. And he opened to show us an artist depiction of a giant that had stood between 30 and 40 feet tall. And then he starts saying there was this time when the earth was infested with such great giants and alien gods that came down and destroyed and ate the people. Some of them were in human form. Others, he said, were monsters like human-animal hybrids, which I think the Old Testament also describes. And then he followed that story with the famous Navajo legend of the White Shell Woman, who gave birth to two of the most important characters in Navajo mythology, the twin miracle-performing sons, one of whose names literally translates Slayer of Alien Gods, and his twin brother. And together, those two great warriors killed many of the giants, hybrids, and the monsters that were destroying mankind. As Dr. Mose described these ancient tales, I couldn't help but think of David killing Goliath, and then later other giants with his mighty men. Then there was a point where Mose paused, and he said, "You know, when the Christian missionaries first came to America and told our people their stories of the giants and the great flood, he said, we smiled and let them know that we already knew these stories, that they had been told to us long ago by our own ancestors." After a week on the road, having covered hundreds of miles of reservations to walk amidst their multiple ruins, including hogans, temples, kivas, to follow guides and visit with a medicine man, not to mention tracking down and photographing petroglyphs, we were finally on our way to the last site that we were going to visit, one that our Cherokee guide had told us not to miss. We already collected enough pictogram and logogram images from ancient rock engravings throughout the Four Corners area to make our case and to calculate for our purposes a recurring theme, which definitely seemed to match the Middle Eastern and biblical stories of portals, reptilians, fallen angels, giants, and the havoc that those creatures had played on the old world. But this final petroglyph that was important, our guide had said, and one that we could drive right up to. So we decided to make one final excursion, this time into Utah, 50 miles north of Moab, where one of the largest known collections of petroglyphs is located in the San Juan County. This storyboard that we would visit there was etched in sandstone as early as 1,000 years before Christ, and it records practically every element contained in the Bible and extra-biblical texts involving spiral vortices and those who come through them, including human-animal chimeras and even giant six-fingered and six-toed footprints in pursuit of much smaller five-fingered and five-toed humans. Even that reptilian that Dr. Don Mose had described to us with its halo was drawn there, just a couple of feet away from the alien-looking bug-eyed creatures. This location is also easier to get to than most of the ones that we trekked to, yet it's as important, if not more so, than any petroglyphs. You could spend days hiking over miles of rough terrain to reach. It's called the Newspaper Rock Petroglyph, and is somewhat decipherable as to which images are older due to the fading and darkness of the earlier depictions, which are certainly the most mysterious with their alien-looking creatures and suits and what might even be some type of a flying craft. And archaeologists believe the writing on this Great Wall continued from 1,000 years before Christ or earlier up until about AD 1300, the same time that the Anasazi suddenly disappeared. The Anasazi used images and symbols similar to those found globally that connect to a first and second incursion of giants and the mountainous gateways that those creators came through. Now, that being true, if you take only the images that the Anasazi left behind and compare them to similar, in some cases identical, universal symbols found elsewhere around the world where the stories and meanings of the images have been made clear, and keeping in mind that these legends materialized globally at approximately the same time, when the Torah, that is Genesis through Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible, was written around BC 1300, this would have been the same time when archaeologists believe the Anasazi across the world from these Bible lands were drawing giant 6-toed footprints on a slab wall in Utah and facing an alien enemy, as the name Anasazi implies.
As a length measure, being of course standardized everywhere. But in the ritual, the 24-inch gauge is used as emblematic of time. When the worshipful master gives the entered apprentice his tools, he says that the 24-inch gauge represents the 24 hours of the day, and it may be used in 2 ways: to graduate his task and to divide each passing day so as to allow of his attending to everything: his devotions, his regular employment, and the discharge of his social obligations. As the fingers of the hand have played an important part in the development of the art of counting, so too they supplied the basis for the art of mensuration all over the East, all the high metrical values consisting of so many palms or hand's breadths, which, like the foot, had to be standardized. In the explanation of the second tracing board, we learn that the outer rim of the twin pillars of the porchway of King Solomon's temple was a hand's breadth in thickness. This statement agrees with the first book of Kings, chapter 6, verse 15. Elsewhere, Jeremiah 52, verse 21, we read that it was 4 fingers thick, and so I shall point out that in this there is no real contradiction, because the hand's breadth of the ritual is to be understood as being not the breadth of the open or extended hand, but that of the back of a clenched hand, in which only 4 fingers are seen. Theoretically, the cubit was the length of a forearm, from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. But unfortunately, as each nation adopted a different standard, we find a great deal of variety in cubits. Indeed, some nations had 2 or 3 sorts of cubits, according to the objects that had to be measured. This may explain the confusion and the controversy that there has been as to the actual length of the cubit employed in designing King Solomon's temple. In Egypt, there were 2 different cubits: the short, which was one of 6, and the royal, which was one of 7 palms of handbreadths. In Babylonia, there were 3 measurements known by that name: one of 3 palms, used in measuring fine decorative work and gold ornaments; one of 4 palms, which was used ordinarily for all masonry work; and one of 5 palms, which was used in measuring land spaces. By the recovery of 2 scales of linear measurements engraved on the statues of Gudea, nearly 5,000 years old, we have found that these 3 cubits equaled 10.8, 14.4, and 18 inches respectively. Some archaeologists argue that both King Solomon's temple and in the tabernacle all 3 cubits of ancient Babylonia were used. On this calculation, the thickness of the pillars would be equivalent to 3.6 inches of our present-day measure, although even now we cannot be quite certain. Finally, about the cable's length. When this expression is now used by sailors, they mean to indicate a distance of about 100 fathoms, or the 10th part of a nautical mile. But as used in the ritual, at least a cable's length from the shore, it means a distance equal to the length of a coil of cable, which has always been understood to be 120 fathoms, that is to say, 720 feet. The idea is that being buried in the sands at the bottom of the sea at that distance from low water mark, as a minimum, the remains of a traitor might be considered to be definitively consigned to everlasting disgrace, and therefore as having absolutely perished. No trace or remembrance being any longer conceivable. This cable's length must not be confused with the length of my cable tow, mentioned in another part of the ritual. This latter being a figure of speech intended to convey the idea of one's ability to execute an acknowledged obligation, the power to fulfill one's own responsibilities in life. The introduction of the cable into the ceremonies may appear strange, but apart from other considerations, if we only bear in mind the way the cable has been manufactured from time immemorial, we shall recognize that it is a very suitable emblem for the threefold cord which is not easily broken, of brotherly love, relief, and truth. In a book compiled nearly 100 years ago, there is a description of it. Every cable, of whatsoever thickness it be, is composed of 3 strands, every strand of 3 ropes, and every rope of 3 twists. The twist is made of more or less threads according as the cable is to be thicker or thinner. The ritual anticipates that after this life every master mason shall be decently interred, but the penalty of our obligation in the 3rd degree involves the very opposite of that idea. I shall therefore close this lecture with a few words on the dimensions of the grave of the 3rd degree and their significance. I have spoken of fathoms, saying that a cable's length equals 120 fathoms, but the fathom is not named in the ritual. It may be defined as the measure of a man's embrace, fixed for all practical purposes at 6 feet, and therefore, although not expressly named, it is the length of the grave which the trusty fellowcrafts of our traditional history are said to have prepared. It was from a centre of 3 feet east and 3 feet west. This is an unusual form of expression, but we may account for it by observing that the navel is regarded as lying in the centre. Remember where the master mason rests his squared hands when he stands to order. The navel is our link with the past, and inasmuch as being buried, the body returns to the bosom of our common mother, the old link is very properly viewed as the central point in the grave. The width of the grave between north and south was 3 feet. These dimensions are still the ordinary minimum dimensions of an adult's grave at the present time, but in the ritual they are given for a practical purpose, being emblematic. As the area was one of 18 square feet, 6 by 3 equals 18, 9 to the east and 9 to the west, and as the depth was a minimum of 5 feet, the total capacity of the grave was of 90 cubic feet, which is the number by which we define the square, an angle of 90 degrees. The cubic measurement of the grave, therefore, is but another way of representing the square. By being laid under the sod, back to the bosom of Mother Earth, we come into the closest possible fellowship with one another, and the depth of 5 feet harmonizes with our 5 points of fellowship. In assigning such dimensions to the grave, therefore, the ritual may be said to bring our symbolism into the reign of death, and we, by endorsing and adopting its provisions, are testifying to the fact that the bond which unites master masons in this life is not broken when we are let down into the tomb of transgression. Having ordered our life according to the square, we take that sign with us to the grave, and we may rest assured that when we finally rise from the last resting place, the same old sign will procure our admission into the grand lodge above, where the world's great architect lives and reigns forever. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries. The Ineffable Name. This lecture was delivered to Research Royal Arch Chapter number 100 of the Supreme Grand Royal Arch Chapter of Queensland on Wednesday the 5th of February 1947 by Right Excellent Companion the Reverend V. H. Whitehouse, Grand J. In the first of the ancient charges concerning God and religion, it is stated, "A Mason is obliged by his tenure to obey the moral law, and, if he rightly understand the art, he will never be a stupid atheist, nor an irreligious libertine. He, of all men, should best understand that God seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh at the outward appearance, but God looketh to the heart. A Mason is, therefore, particularly bound never to act against the dictates of his conscience. Let a man's religion or mode of worship be what it may, he is not excluded from the order, provided he believe in the glorious architect of heaven and earth, and practice the sacred duties of morality, etc. Belief in God, then, is essential before a candidate is admitted to Freemasonry, and throughout all our ceremonies, this belief is taken for granted. The question naturally arises, who or what is the God which Freemasonry proclaims? Several things are evident. A. The God of Freemasonry is the God of the Old Testament, and he has greater affinity with the ideas of the ancient world than with ours. B. Like the Old Testament and the ancient world in general, Freemasonry does not attempt to prove the existence of God, nor to speculate how the knowledge of how that God is arose. Like the Old Testament, Freemasonry moves among ideas that presuppose God's existence. C. Again, like the Old Testament, Freemasonry teaches that the knowledge of God is progressive, i.e., God is known so far as he gives himself to be known. This part C is important and removes what is a difficulty to some. There are ideas of God in the Old Testament that are crude, anthropomorphic, vindictive, and far removed from the Christian conception of the deity. But if it be remembered that God's revelation of himself is a progressive one, God revealing himself as men prove themselves capable of receiving new truths, the difficulty disappears. When reading the Old Testament, and I think also when studying the progressive steps in Freemasonry, it is important to note that the ideas of God therein proclaimed are relative to the state of civilization, on the one hand, and the progress of the candidate on the other, at that particular time. Nowhere is this more evident than in the names by which God came to be known. In the Old Testament, a name was never a sign distinguishing one person from another. It was always descriptive, expressing the meaning of the person to whom the name was given. Thus, when God is called by a name, it expresses that which God has made known of himself to man. It does not represent God himself as he is, but such a manifestation of him as human faculties were able to apprehend. It will be found that these names show that the ancient Hebrew started from some indeterminate conception of God common to the whole Semitic race, i.e. the people closely interrelated in language, custom, and physical features who occupied the southwest of Asia and were led on by degrees to a living apprehension of the being whom they worshipped. In this revelation of God, as expressed by the divine names, there are three stages. 1. Names used before Abraham. 2. Names used in the patriarchal ages, i.e. from Abraham onwards. And 3. Names used in the Mosaic age and afterwards. Names used before Abraham. These early names do not belong to Revelation, at least not to the family of Israel. They are prehistoric. They do not suggest the first stage of Semitic religion. They belong to the stage when the phenomena of the heavens were considered to be due to some power above them. 1. El, God. This title of the deity was widely used and belongs to the whole Semitic world. No satisfactory derivation of the word has yet been suggested. It appears to be part of the verb to be strong, and it suggests the idea of governor or leader with the sense of power or might. 2. Elohim. An interesting title, and again common to Israel with most of the Semitic peoples. It is plural in form, and so has been thought by some to be a remnant of polytheism. But scholars are unanimous in saying that when used of God, Elohim is not plural in the sense of numbers. It is always used with a singular verb, and therefore is the plural of majesty or eminence, the plural of fullness or greatness. The singular of Elohim probably meant strength. The plural intensifies the idea. 3. El Elyon, meaning God Most High, a name which distinguished the deity from other conceivable gods. Speaking generally, this group of terms may be described as universalistic in their meaning. They indicate the relation of God to all that he has made as its creator and sustainer. Names used in the patriarchal age. So far, these names express the general idea of God. He is the power to whom the world belongs. Now a development takes place. God is coming into relationship with his people, and development towards a high morality and faith in a spiritual, omnipotent God takes place. This development we know as the call of Abraham and the foundation of the patriarchal religion. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared unto Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me, and be thou perfect. Genesis 17, verse 1. Separated from his kindred and father's house, Abraham goes alone into the unknown world, with only the God of heaven and earth, El, for his guide. And on the hilltop of Canaan, in the solitude of the desert, he meets God. I am God Almighty, El Shaddai, walk before me, be thou perfect. The idea of God was becoming clear to Abraham. His faith took hold of the idea that God, the Omnipotent, was able to protect him as he ventured into the unknown. He who is called God, El, was El Shaddai, the supreme power, who had given him his fellowship and was condescending to guide his life. Thus, El Shaddai marks an advance on Elohim. Its derivation and meaning is uncertain, but the idea conveyed is that of absolute control over the forces of nature and the course of history. Names used in the Mosaic age. This revelation, El Shaddai, was made to Abraham alone, not to his people, nor his family, nor his father's house. It was El coming into relationship with the individual's soul. Now a further development takes place. God, El Shaddai, comes into relationship not only with individual, but with his people, for families and tribes become a nation and state, a communion and fellowship, not merely by blood, but by a common government and common institutions, and lastly, a strict and definite law. To mark this wider relationship from henceforth, God's peculiar name as God in Israel is Jehovah. In his revelation to Moses, God appropriated the name Yahweh to himself, and stamped it as the name expressive of his relationship to Israel, now about to be entered into and manifested in deeds of redemption, and in memory of these deeds to be henceforth his peculiar name as God in Israel. Although the name Jehovah thus received new currency and significance in the time of Moses, it is far older than the time of Moses. E.g., in Genesis 4:26 it is written that in the time of Enos, the grandson of Adam, then began men to call upon the name of the Lord, Jehovah. This may seem difficult to reconcile with the statement in Exodus 4, "And God spake unto Moses and said unto him, I am the Lord, Jehovah, and I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, El Shaddai, but by my name Jehovah, Yahweh, was I not known to them." The meaning, however, is probably this. Although the name Yahweh was not unknown, its real significance had never yet been experienced by them. Now, God's character, as expressed by this name, would be fully manifested, and that from henceforth it would become his name as God of Israel, and would be peculiar to the people of Israel. Its pronunciation. The pronunciation Jehovah was not used in Holy Scripture until about 1520 AD, and does not claim to be correct. It came about in the following way. When it became unlawful to pronounce this name, probably from motives of superstition, various other words were substituted for it. Thus, the Septuagint translators, i.e. those who in 284 to 247 BC translated the Old Testament into Greek, substituted Kurios, Lord, and the Masoretes, ancient Jewish translators, the word Adonai, Lord. The vowel signs now used in Hebrew were not invented and written in manuscripts until 600 to 900 AD. When one word was substituted for another in reading, it became the practice to attach the vowels of the word to be substituted to the consonants of the original word. Thus, the vowels of Adonai, A-O-A, were attached to the consonants Y-H-V-H, this name of God. In 1518 AD, Petrus Galantius, confessor of Leo X, proposed to read the vowels and consonants as one word, and thus arose Yehovah, Jehovah, Y requiring to be spelled with an E instead of an A. Modern scholarship gives Yahweh, variously spelled Jahve, Jahveh, Yahweh, etc., as the correct pronunciation. Its meaning. The true meaning and derivation of the name is wholly unknown. In the Pentateuch, i.e. the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the word is brought into connection with the verb to be. This expresses not so much the idea of self-existence as what is or will be historically. I think this is suggested in the revelation of the name given in Exodus 3, verses 2 to 14. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they shall say unto me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, This thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. Moses asked for God's name, i.e. a description of his nature and character, and he was taught that it was impossible to learn this all at once. God would be what he would from time to time prove to be. Each age would discover fresh attributes of his being. I will be what I will be. Yet these revelations of God were not considered to be in the minds of those who received them shadows of a reality to come. Therefore, to quote Dr. A.B. Davidson, I will be what I will be expresses the sameness of Jehovah, his constancy, his being ever like himself. It does not express what other attributes he had. These were largely suggested by the fact of his being God. It rather expresses what all his attributes make him, the same yesterday and today and forever. The true in covenant relationship, the unchanging. Hence it is said, I am Jehovah, I change not.
Prayers, dedicating the temple to the service of God. The smoke of the offerings ascended, and the presence of the Lord filled the temple in the form of a radiant cloud, signifying divine approval. As the festivities continued, Solomon took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought him to this day. He thought about the challenges faced and overcome, the wisdom gained, and the divine help that had been crucial in the completion of the temple. Solomon knew that without the aid of the demons, bound and directed by his ring, the construction of the temple would have been an impossible task. Each demon had played a critical role, their unique abilities harnessed for the glory of God. He reflected on how he had turned potential threats into invaluable allies, using his wisdom and divine favor to achieve what no other could. The construction of the temple had been a test of Solomon's wisdom, faith, and leadership. He had navigated through sabotage, natural disasters, and divine trials, emerging stronger and wiser. The experiences had taught him the importance of balance, discipline, and the profound interconnectedness of all things. His wisdom was not just in knowledge, but in understanding and applying that knowledge for the greater good. In his heart, Solomon knew that the temple was more than a physical structure. It was a symbol of human and divine cooperation, a testament to what could be achieved when wisdom and faith guided one's actions. He hoped that future generations would look upon the temple and be inspired to seek wisdom, pursue righteousness, and have unwavering faith in the divine. As night fell and the celebrations continued under the starlit sky, Solomon stood at the entrance of the temple, watching his people rejoice. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude. The temple was complete, a shining beacon of faith and wisdom, and a lasting legacy of his reign. With the temple complete and his reign marked by peace and prosperity, King Solomon turned his focus to another important task, ensuring that the knowledge and wisdom he had gained would not be lost to time. He understood the importance of sharing his experiences and teachings so that future generations could benefit from his insights and continue to walk the path of righteousness. Solomon often pondered the fleeting nature of life and the importance of leaving a lasting legacy. He knew that his experiences, particularly his interactions with the supernatural and the wisdom he had gained, were too valuable to be kept solely within his mind. He made a deliberate decision to document his knowledge comprehensively and to teach those around him. Solomon declared, "Wisdom unshared is wisdom lost. The lessons I have learned must be preserved and passed on, for they are the foundation upon which our future shall be built. The lessons I have learned must be preserved and passed on, for they are the foundation upon which our future shall be built." Solomon gathered his most trusted scribes and advisors, individuals who had proven their loyalty and capability. Among them were Azariah, the chief scribe, known for his meticulous attention to detail, and Benaiah, the head of Solomon's council, whose wisdom and leadership were unmatched. In a series of sessions, Solomon began to impart his knowledge. He recounted his encounters with the demons, the construction of the temple, and the insights he had gained. He taught them about the rituals and incantations used to summon and control the demons, emphasizing the importance of using this knowledge wisely and ethically. Solomon also shared his reflections on morality, faith, and the nature of divine justice. He spoke of the importance of balance, the need for strong foundations in both physical and spiritual endeavors, and the value of understanding and mastering one's own strengths and weaknesses. Each lesson was carefully documented by the scribes, ensuring that every detail was preserved accurately. Solomon encouraged open discussions, allowing his advisors to ask questions and delve deeper into the complexities of his teachings. Understanding the fragility of written records, Solomon took multiple steps to ensure his wisdom would endure. Solomon ordered that multiple copies of his writings and teachings be made. These copies were distributed to various libraries and temples throughout the kingdom, ensuring that even if one set of documents was lost, the knowledge would survive elsewhere. A set of the most critical and sensitive writings was placed in a secret archive within the temple, accessible only to the highest-ranking priests and scholars. This archive was protected by both physical and magical means, ensuring its preservation through the ages. Solomon also understood the power of oral tradition. He trained a select group of scholars and priests to memorize key aspects of his teachings, ensuring that the wisdom could be passed down verbally if the written records were ever destroyed. To cultivate a culture of learning and wisdom, Solomon established schools and centers of learning throughout his kingdom. These institutions were tasked with teaching not only the practical skills needed for governance and daily life, but also the deeper philosophical and spiritual insights that Solomon had gained. The Testament of Solomon was preserved as a sacred text, studied by future generations of scholars, priests, and kings. It served as both a practical manual and a spiritual guide. Its teachings woven into the very fabric of the kingdom's culture and governance. As he grew older, Solomon found solace in the knowledge that his wisdom would outlive him. He had laid the foundations for a legacy that would endure through the ages, guiding his people and countless future generations toward a path of righteousness, wisdom, and faith. King Solomon's reign became the golden age of Israel, marked by unprecedented peace, prosperity, and wisdom. His actions, particularly the construction of the temple and the creation of the Testament of Solomon, left an indelible mark on history. The impact of his wisdom and the lessons he imparted continued to influence future generations, shaping the moral and spiritual fabric of his people. The influence of Solomon's actions and the Testament of Solomon was profound and far-reaching. The temple Solomon built became the spiritual heart of Israel. It was a place of worship, a symbol of divine presence, and a testament to the faith and devotion of the people. The temple rituals and practices, many inspired by Solomon's insights, reinforced a sense of community and continuity. The schools and centers of learning established by Solomon fostering a culture of intellectual and spiritual growth. Scholars and scribes continued to study his writings, expanding on his teachings and ensuring that his wisdom was not only preserved, but also evolved over time. The Testament of Solomon became a foundational text in these institutions, offering practical guidance and deep philosophical insights. Solomon's teachings on morality, justice, and the balance between power and wisdom were ingrained in the governance of Israel. Future kings and leaders drew inspiration from his example, striving to rule with the same wisdom and integrity. The principles outlined in the Testament of Solomon provided a moral compass, guiding leaders in making just and ethical decisions. The temple and its magnificent architecture inspired a flourishing of art and culture. Craftsmen, artists, and musicians found new ways to express their faith and creativity, leading to a renaissance of cultural achievements. The stories of Solomon's wisdom and his encounters with the supernatural became popular themes in literature and art, enriching the cultural heritage of the people. The practical knowledge contained in the Testament of Solomon, particularly the rituals and incantations for summoning and controlling demons, became an invaluable tool for protecting the kingdom. Priests and scholars used this knowledge to defend against malevolent forces, ensuring the safety and well-being of the people. Solomon's legacy also included a nuanced understanding of the balance between good and evil. His encounters with demons and his ability to harness their powers for constructive purposes highlighted several key insights. Solomon recognized that many forces in the world possess both constructive and destructive potential. Fire could forge metal or raise cities, winds could carry seeds or bring storms. His wisdom lay in understanding and harnessing these dualities for the greater good. Through his interactions with the demons, Solomon learned that even beings of darkness had the capacity for redemption and transformation. By binding and guiding them, he turned their destructive powers into forces for creation and construction. This lesson emphasized the potential for growth and change within all beings. Solomon's legacy underscored the importance of human responsibility in maintaining
You know, Most High's the one that's never caught by surprise. Watch is why I'm on the edge of my seat with expectancy. Will they see what they wasn't expecting if you let the public? You know, Most High's the one that's never caught by surprise. Watch is why I'm on the edge of my seat with expectancy. Will they see what they wasn't expecting if you let the public? Don't look up on his countenance. Don't look at how tall he is or nothing like that. Listen to his words and test them. That's all you gotta do. That's all you got. Don't look up on his countenance. Don't look at how tall he is or nothing like that. Listen to his words and test them. That's all you gotta do. That's all you got. Don't look up on him. Hey, you.
She's my tag. Open up the trunk. I gotta go pee, mama. Hurry up, Core. Open the trunk. Oh, hold up. Can you come back with me? Come on, baby. My baby in the Cheetos. She don't go.
Hold on, people, look at some of the stuff. Facial recognition, bioengineering, violation of genocide code, biosocial programming of the human race, breach of the covenant of good health and faith. What's up, champ? Hold on, champ, don't cry. You're a big boy. Hey. Products. Wait till they see her life, an alien artificial life that can mutate or be programmed to spread disease or kill off world citizens in numerous ways. Manipulate, reprogram people's thoughts. It would be a literal event to occur. Signs and wonders indicates that there is yet remains a 7-year period. They don't like this. They don't like this. Trying to tell you, I don't like this at all. Excuse me for a minute. Let him use me for a tenant.
So special.
One time. I do this because I could have died in the streets more than one time. Gotta thank the Lord for one time. One time. Yeah. Shout out to one time. Lonnie. One time. One time. Walkers, Robbers, Wolves, Lions, Cars. One time. Yeah. One time. I'm gonna be unapologetic. It's just a time to share. You hear me? My God differs.
Outside of time, looking at all time at one time. Time difference. Before you even pray for it, it was on the way for you. Always on time, listen. My mama had to cry, tears running down her face, saying, don't you lose faith for it. I didn't. But something gotta shake, Lord. John was the last eyewitness. The Jews had a chance, but they turned their back on the Son of Man, so he went to Gentiles with it. Felt it, but I felt them. I'd rather see us all shine. I know you're tired of running away from one time. Never have I brought you not one lie. I'm the truth. If you want to see some proof, then my first and last name should have been crunch time. Looking in the night sky to see the sunshine. One time, yeah. Look, jumping through portals, I feel like Mario. The Lord is your shepherd. Look how far y'all that came along the road. I don't do make-believe, I don't try to make them believe. If they believe, then they believe. That's just how it go. If I was to wear my heart on my sleeve, then I would have a forearm of gold. 6 wings on the seraphim. Baptized in the Jordan River, John fresh out of jail again. I'm stuck in between hell and prison. They know everything about me, they see straight through me. Turns out I'm made of prism. Everything I bought and worked hard for, he took it from me, even investments, but he kept some sense and paid attention. Now I see the blessings is to know what else is less expensive. I don't even like curses, don't write in cursive, so when I come, you know that blessings visits, and I ain't forget you one time. One time. One time. Ah. One time.
So special.
Yeah. I don't hate nothing but hate. I don't take nothing more than all I can take. I never strong-armed it. That's why you see I'm anointed with strong arm and spiritually strong army. Come visit the one and get your spirit lifted. Eons, whoever came with word and claim it came from me, we've been deceived. Lead thee on to destruction, that isn't me. The more I'm catching on, I envision me. Look back at his story, all you get is his story. Ain't a mystery, it's this story. Thanks to God, we topped the ladder. They gave it all and dropped the ladder. Replaced it with escalators. Now we all up about 10 stories. Yeah, now it's looking like we got the victory. Yeah, from the midnight to the sunshine, I'ma hold it down. And I promise you, know that I ain't forget you one time.